Welcome everybody to another episode of my podcast, and apologies for the slight hiatus between episodes. However, as I'm always delighted, for my regular listeners will know, but really delighted to have Brent on today because Brent and I met indirectly many moons ago in Brent's former life, albeit tangentially, because Brent's background is ex-CEB, for those that know, then became Gartner, now with Ecosystems US, which we'll get into. But Brent is actually the co-author, I believe, co-author is correct, of the Challenger Sale process and the Challenger customer process, which I was brought up on in my early sales youth. So it's a bit of fanboying here to have the author of said sales process on. And you will note the title is The Death of Sales Men, Recognize People, Person, Death of Sales generally, which we're going to get into today. But as always, Brent, I always start with my guests, kind of a who, what, why, when, where, and then let's get stuck into this.
Cool. Hey, awesome. It's great to be with you, Alex, and with all the listeners out there, however many there may be of all of you. I always joke that it's like, oh, it's the Brent episode. There's probably two, but that's okay. And one's my mom. But it's great to be with all of you guys. So my name is Brent Adamson. Some of you may know me as, you hear that line from The Simpsons, but the author of the Challenger Sale, which by the way blew up in ways that one could never have imagined, which is really humbling and super cool. But I have got a long career of trying to understand what world-class selling and marketing, particularly in B2B and enterprise B2B, looks like through a lot of research and a lot of talking to executives around the world. I've since started about 3 or 4 weeks ago at a company called Ecosystems. It's a relatively small company, it's SaaS software. And actually, it's interesting, Alex. This actually is going to come back in the conversation, perhaps, if we wanted to at least. Mm-hmm. It's pretty germane because Ecosystems, the software that we work on, is lives and breathes in the world of what's called value management or value engineering. And I'm finding that a lot of people know a lot about this and a lot of people don't. I've been adjacent to the world of value management for the better part of 10 years and didn't even know it. And it's really actually interesting because in sales, it's not something we spend a lot of time talking about. This is often the SME we bring in to do some sort of value calculation. But I think that value management, particularly in a tough economic context like today, is going to, it's kind of like, you remember like customer success came out of nowhere about 7 years ago. No one had heard of it. Now everyone's got one. Watch the space for value management. I think that's what it's about. But I guess it's a plug. And I'm shameless. There you go. But I'll do the quick plug. And then we'll talk about some cool stuff. We'll bring it all around in a circle at the end. But it's very cool software that helps suppliers and customers collaboratively identify and then define the dimensions of value along which they want to measure a relationship and then track that value over time, whether it's in a land or expand or a success or a service context. And it's really slick. But the whole idea, and this is actually super germane to what I want to share with you guys today, if you're interested, is it creates a really powerful framework for having productive conversations with your customer on the things that they care about most, sometimes which they didn't even know they should be caring about in the first place, which goes right back to Challenger. So that's what I'm up to now. I lead I like to think Chad Quinn, who's the founder and CEO of the company, has kind of given me a home just to keep doing the research that I do. It's almost like having a research studio, and I'll be building out our communities there. So anyway, so anyone who's interested, hit me up. You'll find me on LinkedIn.
Absolutely, I'll put the link into the. I never still do this YouTube thing. The links somewhere to have you, and maybe get. And we'll probably come. And
don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe.
Smash that like button, exactly. And the whole ecosystem piece is interesting, and I believe we will get to that point, or come back on again and we can talk about it, because I'm starting to see the likes of Jill Rowley talk about selling in ecosystems and selling through partnership models rather than in isolation, because fundamentally we all of us together on little component parts actually solve normally the entire problem that an organization is trying to solve, especially if it's large. Complex organization.
In fact, Jill called me about three months ago now and said, "Is this on your radar screen? Because it needs to be." And it was the 3 words I've heard come over the horizon in the last 6 months or so. And this goes right back to the title of your podcast. Is the 3 words are ecosystems, not the company I now work for, but the concept more broadly. Ecosystems, partnerships, and communities are the 3 things that I think, particularly in the SaaS community, in the tech space, companies are leaning into heavily. Because they're finding that the classic sort of SDR, BDR, send out lots of emails and in-mails and everything else is it's run its course in terms of there's diminishing returns there. There's only so many times I can spam the universe with cold calls before it stops working. And for those of you who do
Email,
that for a living, you know what I'm talking about, right? So
exactly.
yeah. By the way, I've been that guy, or at least I haven't been that guy, but I've been the person who's assigned to help those people. So I've sat. We used to at CEB, we had a whole building that was it was 2 floors of a building that was our sales floor, and we had these tiny little cubicles which we called shower stalls because they were. Well, that's what effectively they were the size of a very small, like a European shower stall. You'll appreciate that, right? Because it's like, I'm taking a shower, and we'd get in there, 2 of us, and we sit in a chair and we dial for dollars, right? That's what we called it, right? And we would just take 2 hours, and they just start with a list, and they start at the top, and it was just crank them out, phone call after phone call, phone call. Now, of course, there's more emails, but this wasn't that long ago. I mean, it was 2003, 2004, and then as soon as someone picked up, you just went, right? You just you dive right in. And then they say, "Hi, I'm so glad I caught you. Now let me turn it over to Brent Adamson." And it's like, it's like, yeah, and I'm supposed to be the subject matter expert, say something smart.
We all did it. I mean, back in my recruitment days, it was the smile and dial, or you don't get your chair back until you've made 6 appointments.
You don't get your chair back? Are you serious?
Some of the management style I had was you don't get your chair back until you made 6 appointments, and some poor salesperson still at the end of the day, still standing there on.
Oh my God, that can't even be legal, man. That's probably like straight up hazing.
Back then, none of this kind of.
So we didn't do so much that. So I call that the stick. We did more of the carrot, which is you book X number of calls, you get 37, not even 30 seconds, you get 10 seconds in the money booth. So we had a money booth. I don't know, everyone has a gong, right? You got a gong, but if you're really cool, you got a money booth. You get 20 seconds in the money booth. A little, either the pound notes or the dollars flying around, and they would actually stick in little pieces of paper back in the day, like trip to Hawaii, and they throw it in there, and people go bananas for this stuff. For what it's worth, we could butt this part up if you want, but this is like the history of sales, which isn't, because it's still present day for so many. But in 2000, I don't know when it was, 2014 maybe, we wrote an article for HBR based on a lot of research that we had done, and I called it Dismantling the Sales Machine. And that's what I was referring to, was just that whole activity-driven sales culture of dialing for dollars and booking appointments. The premise, based on a lot of data, was that activities don't necessarily lead to outcomes. Like the things that you, like your actions don't lead to customer reactions. There's a disconnect there. And so if you're just monitoring actions, you're not going to actually be able to predict. Your funnel's going to be a mess, because they're not predictive of actual customer outcomes. And so we called that Dismantling the Sales Machine, and provided an alternative answer. And that's still, I think, it's your main article. What I find today in the SaaS world is we're remantling the sales machine. And that's a made up word, but I kind of like it. But I think that's what this, now I'll put a button in it. So here we go, full circle. That's why I think there's so much interest in this idea of ecosystems and communities and partnerships today, is because a lot of these SaaS companies are looking for blitz growth or blitz scale, and have got investors saying, like, where's my money? Particularly now, they're realizing, oh bleep, that playbook just doesn't work anymore. And it's like, oh, I could have told you that 10 years ago. But it's funny, when you're working off a small denominator, everything looks like you're a genius, right? Because growth comes so easy when you're working off a small denominator, easier as a relatively speaking. And then at some point you get big enough that that playbook doesn't work anymore. And then you start looking around either for a different playbook or for an exit. And that's why I think the SaaS world is so interesting, is because you've got an exit. He's like, I could run this thing until it's broke, and then I'm gonna sell it. It's like, you don't have to worry about what comes next. It's like you bail. Which leads to all sorts of really bad behaviors, when you know that the worst possible punishment for you running these bad sales plays is to make a couple $100 million. I mean, I'm way overstating. I'm way over the tips of my skis.
But you're not. It's like, I love the enthusiasm, but actually it all ties into what we were talking back in the green room when we caught up on this, around this narrative that I'm certainly starting to see play out from research analysts across the piece, or the HubSpots of the world, or the Salesforce of the world, or the Microsofts, or the whomevers, that this death of the role of sales. And I think I'm going to get this wrong, but you shared some stats with me in terms of it's the next generation of buyer, a percentage not wanting to engage with salespeople per se. So that's what I was keen to kind of unpack a little further with you. And I agree with you. Are we remantling the sales process, or has the sales process gone so far reliant that we're doubling down on we've been doubling down on the technology and the science of getting the cadence right, and this and that and that, versus actually taking a step back to your earlier point around these activities don't create the reaction that we need, and fundamentally sales is just talking to a human being, right?
Yeah. It's it's a really great question. And by the way, this is going to sound really pedantic and like I'm correcting. I'm not. It's but the language used is not sales process. And I say that only because I think you and I both agree like having a sales process is pretty important.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing, right? We called it the sales machine because there's something like just like activity driven for the sake of activity. That's where I think whether you call it process or methodology or machine.
That's what I'm referring to.
Exactly, right? 100%.
Selling. Yeah.
Right. So okay, so death of a salesperson. By the way, I get the title. It's like one of the single best pieces of literature plays ever written. Arthur Miller is a University of Michigan grad, go blue. And if you haven't seen the version with Dustin Hoffman in the lead role as Willy Loman, freaking mind blowing. It's just so good and kind of depressing. But like we'll have a conversation about existential dread some other time. But it's all baked in there. It's good stuff. But but I think this like decades and decades and decades of what I would argue is, for lack of a better term, bad behavior in sales. Has gotten like it's like you reap what you sow, and we don't reap what we sow just as individuals. We reap what we sow as a profession. So even the like we're all paying the price for the bad actors, or the people, not even bad actors, but people who did what they were told to do, which is bang out 1,000 calls so you can get 30 seconds in the money booth. 30 seconds is a long time in the money booth now I think about it. But anyway, the as a result, customers have gotten to the point now, and we all know this to be true. Anecdotally, is that when I was still at Gartner, we could see it very clearly in the statistics as well, in the data, that customers are kind of fed up. They just don't want to talk to sales reps anymore. So here's the data I shared with you, and just to be all full disclosure here, I want to give full credit to the research team at Gartner, of which of course I was part of up until just a couple of months ago. So this is quote unquote their data. I'm still working through my pronouns of our versus we are, but their and. But one of the things that they've been watching now, I guess, over the last couple of years is about 3 years ago, we did see this really fascinating statistic. And I don't even remember how we thought to even ask this question originally in our research, but someone came up with it and we put it into our customer surveys that we used to run every year. They still do. And it was simply a very basic question, which is if we're, notice it's a hypothetical. It's not would you or can you, but not can you or do you, but rather would you, right? So if it were possible, would you prefer to buy this complex solution without speaking to a sales rep at all, right? So we've talked a lot in the past about the fact that customers delay interactions with with sales reps as long as possible, that they do much of their learning on their own. But this was like taking it to a whole new extreme, which is rather than delaying that conversation as long as they can, what if you could just like eliminate it altogether? It's again hypothetical. When we first asked that question, and by the way, just real quick, this is B2B we're talking about, and specifically enterprise sales. This is not like buying toothpaste, right? On Amazon. This is industrial turbines. This is business services. This is IT spend. Why is that so hard? Exactly. Thank you. Oh my God. It's like I'm old. This brain stops working every 10 seconds. I have to reboot, unplug, and plug it back in. But all right. So interestingly, about a third of customers said, actually, you know what? If that were possible, I kind of would love that. So that was telling. It's like, wow, a third of customers say they'd prefer to buy complex solutions without talking to a sales rep. We revisited a year later, slightly different question. So it's not really apples to apples exactly. So be careful the methodology there. But that number came back the following year, 43%. And I did a keynote on this. It's still actually out there on LinkedIn, is the Gartner Sales Conference keynote from 2021. And you can still watch it. And we presented some really fascinating and frankly dramatic and kind of scary data if you're in sales around, on average, 43% of customers, B2B buyers, tell us they'd prefer to buy without talking to a sales rep at all. For millennials in that particular analysis, it was over half. I think it was 54% or 53%. So this is just under a majority saying, if I could, I'd rather buy without talking to a sales rep. And then fast forward to 2022 in the spring, this is right as I was departing. The last thing I did at Gartner before I left was I worked with the team to write the keynote, which I ultimately didn't present because I'd left, but my dear friend and colleague, Alice Walmsley did. But that number actually, Alex, had gone, again, Apple it's like Jonathan apples to delicious apples. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not apples to oranges, but it's not, the question was not quite the same. So I gotta be a little careful on how I present this, but that number had gone from the low 40s to the low 70s. Isn't that crazy? I mean, like, right? That number had gone up so high in just such a short amount of time, and I think you could go pandemic and it all like not talking to salespeople in person. But just to be clear, this is not customers saying I'd rather talk to a sales rep on Zoom or some other platform instead of in person in my office. This is I'd rather not engage with a sales rep in any form at all. And I think a lot of companies, a lot of heads of sales I presented that work to, their first reaction was, well, this is really interesting and maybe a little dramatic, but and same thing every time. But it doesn't apply to me. I'm different, because every freaking company is convinced that they're so desperately different from everyone else. And by the way, they're not, because we're all humans at the end of the day. But they say, I'm different because my customers have to come to us, because what we sell is so complex, or because what we do is so customized, or we really pride ourselves on the depth of relationships that we build with our customers such that they really want to come to us and build. But if you go out and ask customers, say, no, I'm good. It's like, if I could, I'd rather buy this without talking to sales rep at all. The funny thing is, in that keynote, that if you were to go watch on LinkedIn, you find is that there's a kicker to this whole story, which is, again, because keep in mind, it's not what customers are doing, because that's what, because chief sales officer look at that, they say, well, I don't see it, so therefore they dismiss it. They say, I don't see it, it's not happening, therefore it doesn't count. And I would often diplomatically, I hope, say, remember, this is not a measure of what they are doing, it's a measure of what they would prefer to be doing if they could, right? And so what you have essentially is this widening gap between the way that you're selling in reality versus the way that your customers would prefer to be buying if they had an opportunity. And that gap, I think, really represents either risk or opportunity for a competitor, or more likely a disruptor, to finally find a way to sell the way your customers want to buy. I mean, the best example in the US, which is where I'm based, is a company called Carvana. You probably haven't bumped into these guys yet, but they literally, it's a car company. They use car sales. They sell cars in a vending machine. And when I say vending machine, literally they build these big buildings that look like vending machines, and you go online and you pick out your car, and you never talk to anyone, and then you go to this site where there's this big vending machine, and if you want, I guess it's optional, but you can take this like really big coin and put it into the machine, and then the thing, just like you're buying a Diet Coke or something, right? The thing goes, it latches onto your car and breaks it down and spits it out the machine, and there's your car. It's like, whoa, isn't that crazy? Carvana, check it out. Like, just the images of this stuff is really interesting. I could buy a car in a vending machine. In fact, I was talking to people in real estate. People are now buying houses sight unseen, at least up until about a few months ago, and God knows what's going to happen with the real estate market now. But this is the point of all this, is like, there was a time, I'm old enough to remember, like, you wouldn't buy shoes without talking to a salesperson. Now, like, why would I ever want to do that? There is a clear, almost inexorable trend, I think, across commerce towards eliminating sales professionals altogether when possible, because of the damage we've done to our profession as a brand, when I just don't see that as valuable to have that interaction. The weird thing, Alex, I'll just get this idea on the table and I'll get your thoughts on this. The kicker is, when you talk to those same customers who say that they'd prefer to buy without talking to a sales rep, they're actually far more likely to regret whatever it is they wind up buying. So it's one of these really interesting, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it stories, right? Which is to say, customers think, there's no value in talking to a rep. I don't want to talk to a rep. It's a pain in my derriere to talk to a rep. They just make things worse. So unfair, but true. That frankly is true sometimes. But then they go out and do it on their own. They find, oh, this is really hard. This is exhausting. This is frustrating. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so confused. I lack confidence in my ability to make a decision. And that's kind of where we are. We're in this like weird damned if you do, damned if you don't space. So all of that tells me, now bring it home, is I think there's a huge opportunity for sales professionals. It is not the death of a salesman or woman or person or professional. If we can figure out how to do it right, if we can find a way to sell or interact or collaborate with our customers in such a way that adds value, which is why I'm at Ecosystems, because I think what we do is a way to do this is super cool. But if we can find ways to help customers feel more confident in the decisions that they're making on behalf of their company, then that's our role. Our role is not to sell so much. Our role is not to describe features and benefits. I mean, I suppose when I say our role, I mean, what I mean by that is our potential role, the opportunity in front of us as sales professionals, is to adopt a posture of my job, my single job, is to help my customers and potential customers feel more confident, not in me and my product or my brand, but to feel more confident in themselves and the decisions that they're making on behalf of their company. And all sorts of goodness comes out of that mental model, or that posture, is what I'm finding.
That's awesome, and I'm very much on the same page. I've always seen the role of a salesperson as you are enabling the purchase. You're helping the person actually make in their mind the right decision to do the right thing for the greater good. And you're right, we become a victim of our own culture, in terms of you're driven by short-term metrics. you put more in the machine at the top, more gets spat out, therefore more KPIs, therefore we must be
That's
doing more, because more equals more equals more, because sales is
More equals good. Yes,
it's a
100%.
numbers game. And this is
Yeah.
where, to your point around the way that the e-commerce has kind of changed and how that's now bleeding into B2B, we kind of expect that cliched Uber, Amazon experience. And I see it as, and I thank you for clarifying. It's people aren't buying this way, but if they could, they believe they would prefer it. It's actually then, when is the right time for a person to be inserted into the entire sales process to help that person along the journey? And this was coming out of, actually, I think it was Gartner, actually, your former house, in terms of the future CMO at the beginning of the year, of how they were predicting that CMOs will be looking at how do they use AI to slow down the buying process, to stop buyer regret, and then use data and AI to figure out when is the right time to insert a human being, be it this way, physical, chatbot, what have you, to help that person actually make the right decision. To stop your exact point, for the most part, if we self-serve, you're going to be, oh, damn it, I wish I'd known that before I bought it, and now I can't do that, and now I'm stuck in a loop because I didn't speak to a person, and so on and so forth, which then comes to what I'm hugely passionate about, is kind of the importance now of data in your sales process, or the buying process. The world of customer journey orchestration, so learning what the likes of Thunderhead do. Thunderhead has now been acquired by someone recently. This is what e-commerce firms do, which then reminds me of the brilliant piece you did with Jenna Pipchuk and Jeff Lowe, Canadian company Smart Technologies, and what they dismantled, actually, their sales process, right, and remantled it through to the unified commercial engine, based on data and insight, bravery, but actually in a way that their clients wanted to buy. They took the bold approach of, okay, well, that's how you want to buy, we'll sell the way you want to buy, but make sure that we're doing it in a informed way.
That's right.
Rather than we're just going to reinvent the process again for the sake of reinventing the process. So how are you kind of seeing that manifest in your world?
So there's so many interesting things going on right now. And then we should find a way to link that article, that HBR article, the show notes, or that'd be awesome, right? Because if you haven't seen it, it's worth a read. And if that sounds in any way self-serving, I apologize. It's just so impressive what
it's a brilliant read, and I fully
thank you. I know, I appreciate it, honestly. If it's at all brilliant, it's because the people, the story that I'm sharing is done by brilliant people. The team at Smart Technologies, for those who probably don't know them, many of us, it's a educational technology company. They're based in Calgary, Canada. They're owned by Foxconn, so they're actually part of this massive global network. It's kind of interesting, but they are. If you go into a classroom today, just about anywhere in the world, oftentimes you'll find like a big flat panel screen or a TV with a projector on the ceiling. That's what Smart Technologies does. They build that kind of technology to allow classrooms and teachers and students to interact with each other and the world and the internet, and so on. Okay, so I'll let everyone read the article, right? Because we could just rehash the whole detail. It's super interesting. But what they've done, to your point, is they've dismantled sales, marketing, success, customer success, and service. They don't have those functions anymore, but they didn't fire anybody, and especially not the head of sales and head of marketing, Jeff and Jenna, who I've known Jeff for literally years. He's brilliant marketer. Jenna's amazing. He's the former head of sales. They now collaboratively run what they call the unified commercial engine. And the whole thing, to your point, Alex, is it's built back from customer buying jobs, right? Mm-hmm. It's built back from and this is all based on the jobs to be done approach, which someone will know from Clay Christensen and the guy named Bob Mesta. Bob Mesta, by the way, it's Moesta, Bob Mesta. He's written a book where he captures a lot of his jobs to be done work and applied it to sales. It's brilliant work. He's a great guy. And so based on research that we did with Bob, and then Jeff and Jenna saw from us, and then some from other places too, they put together this unified commercial engine. Here, there's a couple points of this that, again, the details are in the article, so check that out. For what it's worth, by the way, the title is like totally over the top. It's like sales and marketing are becoming obsolete. Dear friends, I don't have dear friends, but I say that because I don't ever want them to not love me at HBR. They're an amazing team at HBR, so hopefully I can keep publishing with them. that title's a little over the top. That's their title, not mine. But I think it gets you at the
attention,
idea,
right? It
right?
grabs
Well,
the
it's kind of
attention.
clickbait. Even HBR does clickbait. Who knew? But it's like, but they're really good, so it's okay. But the thing I think that's interesting that's worth drawing out here is kind of the first point you made, which is where. So if that's all true, and you're absolutely right. The work that my colleagues on the marketing side at Gartner, led by Sharon Cantor-Cuevas and some others, brilliant research on, sometimes to move someone more quickly through the funnel, you actually have to slow them down. You actually have to introduce a little bit of friction and cognitive dissonance into their thinking. And some place you want to speed them up, some place you want to speed them slow them down, which by the way is totally consistent with Challenger, for example. I need to reframe them. But what they did is it's a much more nuanced version of that idea, which is sometimes, but not all the time. And there's places you want to do the opposite, perhaps make things easier. Sometimes you want to make things at least cognitively a little harder. Here's the thing that Jeff and Jenna kind of realized, which came out of a lot of our research and a lot of their own experience too, is you mentioned when is the right time to do this, right? And I think for a lot of us in sales, that goes back to our comment earlier about the sales process. We would probably think to resolve or find an answer to that question, when is the right time, in terms of steps, a linear motion, right? So if a sales process, 10 steps long, goes from opportunity identification down to close and then implementation, we say, so is it stage 3 that I slow them down? Is it stage 5 that we slow them down? And what we found in all of our research is that that's probably not the best way to do it. This is why I really just so deeply respect what Jeff and Jen have done at Smart, is in redefining sort of what they're trying to do, which is not move someone through their sales process and not even move someone along the customer buying journey. I think more people have spent a little more time with this stuff. Well, we don't do that. We try to move customers through their buying journey. The language they've adopted is, how can we help our customers complete their buying jobs to their satisfaction? Which is a very different language. It's not language of progression. It's language of completion. Right? How do I help and this is all consistent with a jobs to be done kind of perspective that Bob put together. And the reason why that matters is because it is an acknowledgement that those jobs aren't necessarily completed in linear order, right? So broadly speaking, we often talked about jobs as problem identification, solution exploration, requirements building, supplier selections. It's just a very basic approach. At Smart, I talk about in the article, customers have a learn job and a buy and an implement. So it's pretty similar. But just because, so if I identify a problem, so then I have identified a problem. Now I'm going to go explore solutions. But in the process of exploring solutions, you realize, oh, bleep, there's a whole dimension of this problem I totally didn't anticipate. I could go back or someone else, here comes procurement or legal or someone else. They've got other questions, which sets us back. So it's often 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. We created this graphic called the title was The Long Hard Slog, which was, I call it the spaghetti bowl at Gartner, which is this graphic with arrows. It's like, here's the 4 buying jobs across the center, and there's just arrows going everywhere. And it's just a big mess. Martha Mathers drew that diagram on a Sunday afternoon, sitting on her couch with her kids. And it's brilliant. It's just absolutely brilliant. She's gone on to be a CMO herself. And this is just the reality of just buying. It's nonlinear. It's a mess. And so our job, I think, so how do we rehabilitate the salesperson? Our job, at least can be, our mission, should we choose to accept it, would be to ask, how can we materially simplify that long, hard slog for our customers? How can we help them anticipate obstacles such that they can avoid them? How can we help them see landmines so that they don't step on them, figuratively? That if that's too graphic, I apologize. How can we help them get people involved earlier that typically get involved later and blow things up? And how can we help them answer their questions proactively? So this is all part of a world we call buyer enablement, because the idea is if you can do that, you can make them more confident. Now, to bring that all full circle to when is the right time is not in step 5 or step 4 or step 3. The right time is at those moments when customers are directly involved in completing that job. So, and sometimes you can actually prompt someone into a job or back into a job. So if they're building out requirements, this is kind of heart and soul Challenger too. If they're building out requirements and baking out the RFP, who's to say you can't ask the right kinds of questions or provide the right kind of framework to lead them on a journey that puts them back into problem identification mode? Hopefully not in an exasperating and frustrating way, but in a productive way, such that they can think like, oh, you're right. We didn't think of that. We need to go back and think about that a little more. And rather than just like saying, good luck with that, call me in a week when you're ready to buy, you might say, and as you go through that, we have found in working with other customers like you, that there's probably 3 questions you got to figure out here. And here's those 3 questions. Now, what the answer is to those questions This can be different for each company. It'll be different for you because every company's different. So you run right at what they think is true, right? It's not true, but run right at it. Give them some credit for that, right? It's because you're different. So here's how many companies will answer these three questions. You'll have to come to your own conclusions. If you'd like some more information, we're happy to help you think about or provide you context of other companies and give you a sense for how they've figured this out. But you need to feel confident on these three dimensions in order for you to feel good about this purchase. What I'm doing there is less challenger, it's less frame breaking, and what I would call instead is more frame making. So I think that's the role of sales professionals today. We talk about empathy and we talk about humanness and connection and building trust, and all that stuff's important. It's just kind of abstract. So I think in a very practical sense, it is, how can I take my customer by the hand and become their, figuratively, because that'd be weird otherwise, and become like their Sherpa, their guide through this decision-making process by giving them a framework that they can use to confidently come to their own conclusions. It's a very Socratic way of thinking about selling, as opposed to showing up and saying, I've been doing this for 30 years. Look, here's what, I don't know if you say, look, that sounds really snarky, doesn't it? But I say, I've been doing this for 30 years. I have found there's two things you got to get right. Here's what you need to do. And I just show up and just tell you the answer. Yeah. Goes over really horribly. There's the other article in HBR that came out recently as one that I wrote on something called sense making. And sense making is kind of this. It's like, if one is buyer enabled, it's helping you through decision making complexity. Sense making is helping you navigate information complexity and feeling more confident about the decisions you make on all that great information that's out there. And again, the answer can't be just tell you, here's the two things you need to know, because no one trusts someone who says, trust me. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Right? This, I know, right? So this is, by the way, for what it's worth, as a footnote to a footnote to, I think we're deeply nested. It's like a Matryoshka footnote at this point. It's like Russian nesting dolls, but that's okay. But the is this word, so every time I talk about these things, someone says, oh, you mean be a trusted advisor. And my reaction is always like, I guess. Or it's like, yes, no, I don't. It's like an empty vessel that can mean anything. So if you mean exactly what I'm talking about by trusted advisor, then yes. But if it's like show up and be friendly, probably not. So anyway.
Yeah, well, the trusted advisor is another thing that's just been done to death in terms of what does that actually mean. I really, I like the jobs to be done, completed piece. And I'm a big advocate of that slide your colleague created in terms of the spaghetti bowl.
Brilliant.
Here's the buying process, and this is just one person. Imagine if you've got 8 people involved in this doing this, with different tensions, different agendas, different jobs to be done at different times. What LinkedIn refers to as multi-threading. It's no easy task. So with all that in mind, going kind of full circle then back to, yes, okay, we've got our avid listeners, my mother, your mother, whomever, listening to this, going, what are they talking about? As a CRO or head of sales or what have you, or an SDR, AE, BDR, whoever, it doesn't really matter. You're thinking, going, okay, that's all well and good, Brent, I get it. But the way that my metrics are driven, whatever those metrics might be, do not support that methodology, if we're going to call it methodology, or read the article, listen to the podcast, the unified commercial engine, that doesn't support that way of working. So what are some of the things that we can potentially do to at least start this journey of recognition that people want to buy differently? They probably do want to talk to human beings. They probably do need to talk to salespeople in some shape or form. But you sit there going, if it's kind of working at the moment, this feels really, really hard to do. So what would be your advice for somebody where do you begin to start unraveling all of this and try and start that journey of sales transformation? If you
I'm with you. It's such a great question, Alex. So there's a ton to unpack here. So for the sake of time, let me just throw out a couple of quick ideas and then further conversations. I'm happy to have them. I'm no longer in the role of an advisor to sales leaders, although I'm happy to just do that for fun. And that may have been a mistake. LinkedIn's about to blow up. But one of the ways is to do it with better tools. Of course, so there is that plug for ecosystems and why I'm here. I'm literally here because I think the tool that I'm now part of getting out into the world is a powerful tool for having these kinds of conversations with customers. It's a frame making tool. It's a buyer enablement tool around information. So I'll leave that there. And I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about like, how do you have conversations with your customers around the dimensions of value that really matter? sometimes when nobody even knows, and you can use this tool to help you figure that out with prompting and things like it's very cool. So that's an example. But I think at a high level, Alex, there's kind of the way I always think of these things, and we talk about this in the Challenger work too, is at two levels. There's organizational capability and there's individual skill.
Mm-hmm.
And at the organizational level, I think just the profile of smart technologies is like at the highest level. That's like we kind of need to think about rewiring the entire commercial engine, right? It's a scripted line that I wrote a while ago, but I do believe it sincerely, which is I think the single biggest barrier to breakout growth in the next 5 years is going to be our own internal structural silos.
Okay.
Period. I think the fact that we do this in sales and this in marketing and this in success and now this in service and now there's this thing called value management. I've been already in 3 weeks into this profession of value management, I've been harping on everyone in this field. Like if we just set this up as yet one more function, we're toast because it's the last thing we need is yet one more function inside the commercial organization. So I don't know that you need to build smart. This is, I think, the downfall of that article in HBR around smart is people look at that and say, I could never do that, or I can't do that, or I won't do that. I don't think smart would say, I think they'd agree with me in saying, no one's suggesting that what they've done is the right answer and you must do that. It is a right answer and it's a right answer for them. But I think at the heart of it is a principle of we need at the organization level to find a way to, how do you say this without sounding just cliche, to better align all of the different activities across these legacy functions such that we're not solving for functional excellence, but such that we're solving for customer confidence. And that's going to, how you do that exactly. So this is why you see the rise of things like revenue operations or RevOps, because a lot of that data, of course, transcends these boundaries as well. So there's a lot to talk about there. I think also at the organizational level, I spend a lot of time talking to C-suite officers. That sounds very, but I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of very senior people. It's super cool, and I tell them the same thing I tell someone at the individual level, the individual skill level, which is my sense is the best thing that we can do right now is run everything through the lens of customer confidence. Mm-hmm. Whatever we do and however we choose to engage with our customers through whatever channel, whether it's website design, whether it's sales collateral, whether it's individual sales interactions on Zoom or in person, is to ask ourselves, what are the things that are going to make our customers less confident, not in us, but less confident in themselves? And how do we help them? How do we combat that? How do we help them feel more confident to make not just a decision, but a bigger decision? And that might be helping them feel more confident about the information they're looking at, help them feel more confident about the conclusions they're coming to, help them feel more confident about their own ability to navigate their internal sales complexity. To do that at the individual level, I think what that takes is, it's like you kind of made the point, Alex, is like, God, this stuff's so hard. And I think that's just, but I think that it's like an empathy point of, what's really hard for is your customer. And you ask anyone on the buying side, senior executives who have to buy on behalf of their company, and a lot of salespeople sometimes are involved in this as well. And you ask them, what's one word, one adjective to describe a recent buying experience that you've been involved in on your company? And I've done this literally thousands of times around the world, the before times when we traveled, and they'd always say long, hard, frustrating, awful. I never heard a positive word ever. My all-time favorite was a CMO in Chicago. Is that her one word, one adjective to describe her buying experience was, I never want to do that again. That was her word. And it's like, it's so. I agree. Do you know what I mean? It's awful.
We're experiencing that just awful. I mean, only yesterday, after 4 months of toing and froing, expecting that a meeting was supposed to be solving the answer we were asking, it transpired that we knew more about their product than they did, and I lost it. I lost it on the call, going with the greatest respect, very firmly but politely, going, "This just isn't good enough. 4 months and we still haven't moved this forward, and you've just given me a piece of information which I know is fundamentally wrong because I'm on your website. Your website is telling me something different. And you've got two technical people going, oh my goodness. You've got the AE going, oh, blah, blah. And it's just like, and me back channeling with my colleague on Teams chat going, why is this so bleep hard?
Right.
Questions
and it is
are not difficult.
So what if your job as a sales professional, what if one's job as a sales professional is to figure out my goal and my sole goal? My sole goal is to go to Cancun on this, the president's trip, but the sales, right? But my sole goal conceptually is to make it easier. That's it. That's like, how can I help my customers just feel better about this long, hard slog, feel better about themselves, feel better about the decisions they're making? How can I be the one when they think my name, they think, oh, I got to talk to Alex. Every time I talk to Alex, he just makes me feel better about this thing. How do I become that person? And I think that's where empathy really comes in, because to do that, you have to understand what is hard about buying in the first place. What are the places they're going to get hung up? What is the information they're looking at, and how does it confuse them? You have to kind of get inside their head and not just understand their business. You got to understand how they think about their business. You have to understand how they think about the decision-making process. And that's hard, particularly for a 20-something sales rep who's never been in that context before to do that. So you got to rely on each other as a team, on your leadership team, collectively, to kind of build almost like collective empathy, right? To figure out, but one way or another, you've got to find a way to put yourself into the head of your customers and kind of not just ask yourself, what do they need to know, but you have to ask yourself, what do they need to feel? And that's when I think some people just do that naturally, I think, but that's when you're no longer going to be the death of a salesman. That's when you're going to be, that critical person I just want to talk to, because it's like, not only do you help me understand things, I just feel better about myself and my ability to make decisions in my company when I talk to you. That's gold.
The phoenix of the salesman, person, people, whatever it is.
Well, that's it. That is the rebirth of the sales profession, but it's never going to happen at scale if we've got heads of sales saying, bang the phones and here's your 30 seconds in the money booth. We are our own worst enemies. It's like everything we do in life seems to be like the Planet of the Apes, the original movie. It's like, you blew it all up, you bastards, right? It's like this is why we can't have nice things, Alex. I'm a little skeptical today, but it's like, but I think that I think this is the battle we win at an individual level, because collectively we'll find a way to screw it up. If nothing else, we'll all do it and become commoditized, and we'll have to find something new to do down the road. But for now, that's our opportunity, that as I see it in front of us.
Indeed. And if I may add one kind of final piece to hearing you talk about that kind of the rewiring of all of that, and the cliche, put yourself in your customer's shoes. And I was taught that 20 years ago, when all you had was a phone and the yellow pages to cold call. Was involve your customers. Involve your customers, your long-serving, if you have them, who've bought from you. Work with them collaboratively to work through what that buyer-enabled process might look like, and involve them in that, rather than we make assumptions on maybe this should happen and this should happen. Yes, we have data and insight. Yes, we have AI and all this kind of stuff. But fundamentally, if we're truly going to be client-centric, customer-centric, value enablers, the people, or the person that can answer whether you're going to do that right or wrongly, that's a word, that's grammatically correct,
I'll buy it for $1.
Are the people that are going to be buying what you do. So why not involve them in that rewiring
100%.
Of your journey?
In fact, let me do this, Alex, just to kind of maybe button up with a practical tip, because I see a lot of your listeners, honestly, all joking, besides our moms, like okay, but freaking tell me what to do. So, or at least give me some advice, which, by the way, ironically, is exactly the whole narrative of this conversation, is that what they feel as individual sellers is what your customers feel as buyers. It's literally the same thing. You know why? Because we're all humans. So, but here's a practical tip for those of you who have customers, or at least have access to customers who have bought your solution successfully. Here's a couple things you might talk to them about. Ask them, hey, I don't know why all conversations seem to start with the word hey, but hey, if you were to buy this again, what would you do differently to make it easier? Or if you were to go on this buying journey one more time, what advice do you wish you had gotten that would have made it less stressful? Who got involved late that you kind of wish had gotten in early? I could keep riffing, but you get the idea. Like this, in other words, go to the people who have successfully navigated the minefield and ask them for their advice. What advice would you provide to someone else in your shoes about to go on this journey? And then share that with permission, of course. But so, it's because then I can put that into the, like what I often joke, it sounds so cynical, the phrase that pays, but it's like used cars. But the phrase is simply, in working with other customers like you, one of the things that we have found is, and so it's like, in working with other customers like you, one of the things we found is that procurement always gets involved in these deals, but they always get in late. When they get in late, it blows everything up. And it's so frustrating. See, I'm playing on emotion, not just knowledge, right? And it's like, I can't imagine that drives you nuts too. So, yeah, tell me about it. It's like, so what we've learned from these customers is here's at least a way to think about it. I'm not telling you here's what you need to do. I don't say here's what you need to do, right? Here's a way to think about it. Language. I'm a linguist by training, right? So language is everything to me, right? So here's a way to think about it. I'm giving you the choice to opt in here. One thing you might consider, opt in, is getting procurement involved early. What we've found from these companies is when you do that, there's a way you want to do that, and here's what they have told us. So I'm not telling you what I'm thinking. I'm just Switzerland. I'm just sharing what you want to know desperately, which is what other companies like you do. They have found that when you get them involved early, here's the 3 questions you got to be ready to answer for them. And those 3 questions are boom, boom, boom. And if I have that conversation with my customers, not guaranteed, but I would imagine for a lot of my potential customers say, wow, that was really helpful. Thank you. You've just made my life easier. So that's the practical tip, is interview your customers, have conversations with them, explore with them. We talk about discovery in sales all the time. This is like post-sales discovery. I think I just made up a new concept, which is discover from existing customers what was hard, what they would do differently, and then share that advice diplomatically, with permission, maybe with no names attached, and in a Socratic sort of frame-making way with customers about to go on that journey.
There we go. What a way to end. I'm going to trademark that myself.
Oh, come on now. I keep making money for other people. That's my lot in life, Alex. That's what I do.
Post-sales discovery. Brent, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Genuinely, it's been a pleasure. I know I've been
great fun
pestering you on LinkedIn and tagging you on posts here, left, right, and center, but it's achieved the outcome I wanted. You're now a guest on my podcast, so that kind of social selling does work when executed well, but we can
100%
today. If people want to reach out to you and learn more about ecosystems, I can point them to your profile, that kind of stuff, point to the website. I'll put the links here somewhere. I'll put the links to the books you mentioned, the
very cool
you wrote, all that kind
of
stuff.
Actually, Alex, on that real briefly, we are on the Ecosystems website, ecosystems.us. We're actually, for those who are actually involved in this thing called value management or interested in it, we're building a Slack community, a community of which there's a Slack channel. And so you can find more information under resources/communities on the website.
I'll give the link to make it as easy as possible.
One of the things I do there, by the way, is I like jump into the Slack channel once a day and just ask a totally over the top provocative question, and then people pile on. So if that kind of thing intrigued you, then sign yourself up. We'll see you over there.
I will. Yeah. I might join in one.
Cool. Awesome, man.
Another channel.
All right. Yeah, except one more Slack channel for everyone to deal with. Exactly. Oh God, information overload. Ironic. The irony is thick. I'm telling you.
Really, really good to have you on as a guest. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely, Alex. Cheers, man.
All my listeners, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. If you want to be on the podcast, you know what to do. If you want to recommend guests to be on the podcast, you know what to do. But as always, thank you wherever you are in the world. Have a good day. Brent, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers, man.